with respect to the inside corner. At the height of tack-welded welding rod, start TIG welding while keeping the same distance as the radius of the welding rod. Weld up to the edge of the welding rod. This is the completion of the weld that does not affect the two vertex angle above. In this case, the inside corner was polished to create a C-shaped surface. Now, a galling on a flat surface is welded in the double wire mode. With the welding rods held firmly by the electrode from the top, tack weld each welding rod on the galling from the end. Be careful to prevent any part of the resistance torch other than the electrode from contacting the mold. Perform TIG welding. Weld the middle of the row of two welding rods from the end. At the height of the tack-welded welding rods, start TIG welding while keeping the same distance as the radius of the welding rods. Weld up to the opposite edge of the welding rods. Perform non-wire operation to fix insufficient melting or uneven beads. This is the completion of the weld covering the galling. Now, 3 vertices are welded in the aluminum mode. Position the electrode straight to the 3 vertices to be finished. The distance between the damage to the electrode should be the same distance as half the height of the welding rod used. In this case, the distance is 0.3 millimeters. Also, keep the same distance as the length of welding rod between the welding rod and the electrode. While welding, press the welding rod by the hand to prevent the position of the welding rod and the electrode from changing. While striking an arc, press the welding rod into the damage. Perform welding repeatedly while pressing the welding rod to build up the weld. Without pressing the welding rod, the weld cannot be built up at 3 vertices. This is the completion of the welding of 3 vertices on the aluminum mold. Even though the welded area is polished, it can be confirmed that no shrinkage is observed. This is the completion of the repair with no shrinkage in 3 directions. Now, 2 vertices are welded in the aluminum mold. After setting the aluminum mold, perform welding in the same way as the welding of 2 vertices in the single-wire mold. Apply the end of the welding rod firmly to the top surface of the mold to perform welding. Position the mold and the electrode at the same height as the radius of the welding rod. Keep the same distance as the radius of the welding rod used between the welding rod and the electrode and start welding. Position the electrode at an angle of 45 degrees relative to the damage. In this case, welding is performed from one end to the other end of 2 vertices, so 3 vertices are also welded. When welding 3 vertices, press the welding rod while welding to build up the weld. This is the completion of the weld combining 2 vertices and 3 vertices. In the case of aluminum welding, heat the welded areas to blend it with the base material before polishing. This is the completion of repair with no cavity and shrinkage. Now, a plain surface is welded in the aluminum mold. First, perform non-wire operation to fill the damage in order to prevent the generation of cavity. Cavity means a pinhole created in the weld. Perform non-wire operation at the same height as half the size of the welded rod used. Position the mold and the electrode at the same height as the radius of the welding rod. While keeping the same distance as the radius of the welding rod used, between the welding rod and the electrode, start welding. With the end of the welding rod applied firmly to the damage, weld the middle of the welding rod in order. This is the completion of the welding of aluminum plane surface. Now, large-scale build-up welding is performed in the pulsing mode. After setting the pulsing mode, start welding. First, weld 2 vertices in the same way as the welding of 2 vertices in a single-wire mode. Apply the end of the welding rod firmly to the top surface and position the electrode at an angle of 45 degrees relative to the center of the damage. Position the electrode and the mold at the same distance as the radius of the welding rod. In this case, the distance is 0.6 millimeters. If the welding rod is too long to be accommodated, bend it. Finally, apply the electrode to the edge of the welding rod and perform welding to prevent shrinkage. Next, the plane surface is welded. Position the mold and the electrode at the same height as the radius of the welding rod, while keeping the same distance as the radius of the welding rod used between the welding rod and the electrode. Weld the middle of the welding rod. When performing large-scale build-up welding, be sure to wear heat-resistant gloves. Since the both ends of this mold is higher, start welding from each end to connect the weld in the middle. This is the completion of the weld combining 2 vertices and a plane surface. Shrinkage can be prevented even in the case of large-scale build-up welding. Now, 2 vertices and 3 vertices on copper alloy are welded. Copper alloy can also be welded using the aluminum mold. The positions of the electrode and the welding rod should be the same as those in the aluminum mold. Apply the end of the welding rod firmly to the top surface of the mold, and position the electrode at the same height as the radius of the welding rod, while keeping the same distance as the radius of the welding rod used between the welding rod and the electrode. Start welding. Apply the welding rod along the shape of the mold. If the copper alloy is angled and it is difficult to continue welding, cut the welding rod to change its angle to resume welding. Next, build up the weld on 3 vertices. In the same way as the welding of 3 vertices in the aluminum mold, perform welding while pressing the welding rod. Position the electrode straight to the 3 vertices to be finished. The distance between the damage to the electrode should be the same distance as half the height of the welding rod used. Also, keep the same distance as the length of welding rod between the welding rod and the electrode. Now, then a copper alloy is repaired. When welding dents, use the same setting as that for plain surface. First, perform non-wire operation on the dent to smooth it, and preheat it to prevent leakage. Position the electrode at the same distance as the radius of the welding rod used. While keeping the same distance as the radius of the welding